Welcome to Making Zero Trust Real. Today we're going to talk about end-to-end security architecture, guidance related to it, to help you on your zero trust journey. My name is Simos. I go by lead cybersecurity architect at Microsoft. I also work at the Open Group as co-chair of the Zero Trust Architecture Forum, and I'm also co-author of a book called the Zero Trust Playbook. Little discount code for you if you're interested. Sharon?
Thanks, Mark. My name is Sharon Chahal, and I'm a Principal Product Manager in the Microsoft Security Customer Engineering Division. I'm also part of the Open Group Zero Trust Working Group. So what are we covering today? So on our agenda, we're going to be talking about Zero Trust and its end-to-end security approach, Microsoft's Zero Trust approach, industry partnerships, really talking about how security is a team sport, actionable guidance, giving you an update on what we have available, publicly available to you, and what's coming on the horizon, what the key areas that you should be looking at when you're planning your end-to-end security approach. Mark.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about why we're having a zero trust conversation. Really, what is the reason behind it, the raison d'etre for those of you that speak a little French? Ultimately, IT has been, and IT security has been complex for a very long time. We're very aware of it today, but even going back to the 1980s, 1990s, when there was all sorts of machines, all sorts of PCs and Macs and mainframes and servers and the like, there's a lot of stuff out there. It's like, okay, we're starting to see attacks. How do we keep this thing safe? How do we keep this stuff safe? And well, we put out all the copper wires, sometimes fiber, but hey, we put all these things here. Let's go ahead and make that a safe zone, right? And set up a perimeter around it, kind of borrowing from military thinking and military doctrine. And this seemed like a pretty simple solution to the problem, where keep the bad stuff out, keep the good stuff in, life is good. Unfortunately, those assumptions started to unravel over the years, and lately they've almost completely unraveled, because attackers have found good, reliable ways in that don't involve penetrating the network. They send phishing emails, they steal credentials. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get sort of inside corporate network, and at the same time, there's also the assets themselves don't sit there. Like, it started with email and attachments happening, in the mid to late 90s, and then all of a sudden we have mobile devices. And then we have cloud services, and that whole good stuff in, bad stuff out, that paradigm just doesn't work anymore. And so what we actually need is a different paradigm, a different way of thinking, a different core underlying philosophy and assumptions, and that's what zero trust is. We're not trusting that network is perfectly secure and that everything on it is therefore inheriting that perfect security. We don't do that anymore. We assume an open network. We assume that trust must be explicitly validated, whether that asset is in the network, on the border of the network, or outside the network. The network is an interesting and useful control still. You're not going to take your firewalls down or anything like that, or your web application firewalls. You still have a use for those things, but you're not betting your entire security posture on it. You're explicitly validating trust wherever these assets go. And so that's really what zero trust is in a nutshell. We're going to talk a lot more about it as we go through. And one other thing that we wanted to cover here as we talk about improving resiliency here, ultimately, security is a risk discipline, and every risk discipline shares this basic fundamental structure in common, which is you're focusing sort of on the left of bang. Ultimately, you're trying to make bad stuff not happen. You're trying to prevent it from happening. You're trying to lessen the impact and the likelihood of things happening. And you're dealing with it when it happens. So attacks do happen. We assume breach, we assume compromise, which we'll talk about more in a bit. But ultimately, we have to look at that entire life cycle of we got to keep the bad stuff from happening as much as we can. Then we need to deal with it if and when it does happen. And this is captured extremely well in the NIST cybersecurity framework. We have a depiction of the version 2 here with the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, as well as the govern that goes around all of it. So very much a risk discipline when you look at security all up. And that's what it is, simple in concept, as it were. So now let's have a little bit more fun with this. This is using Age of Empires 2 for those gaming geeks out there like myself. And ultimately, the anti-pattern that we see, and anti-pattern is just a common mistake that a lot of folks make, is believing that attackers are going to follow the planned path. We laid out the firewalls, we laid out all these things, and we're expecting the attackers to come through this front door, and we've got all of our defenses lined up there. And that may be how some attackers work, but a lot of them pretty much are very practical because they're there to get a job done. They're there to make their boss happy. They're there to get a paycheck. They're there to achieve a mission of some sort that's greater than themselves, hacktivism and the like. So there's a lot of different reasons why attackers do it, but that drives them to look for other ways because they're there for the objective. And so it's not just about having those strong security controls, which is core, but placing them effectively, responding to attacks effectively wherever the heck they happen, and continuously testing and monitoring those controls. And so taking a practical example of this, in this next slide here is, hey, the attackers are pretty quickly going to figure out they've got next-gen firewall, IDS, IPS, intrusion detection prevention, and data loss prevention. Let's go ahead and try something different. I bet you their admins would love to get paid more to do their job, and they'll probably check email from their admin workstations. So let's go ahead and send that phishing email. Oh, that worked. Now let's see if those admins actually have passwords.xls. That one was easy. So now we can use this and take those service account passwords and go to the objective we want. So the attackers are very creative, very exploratory, and use the data they have. And so they're very practical, and you have to have that in mind as you build your security defenses. So very, very critical there. And so, the example defenses for this as we go into this next slide to show all of those defenses that can help with this. First, you want to protect the data itself. If you've got something that's really valuable, you put security and protections around that. You learn how it's used. You protect it everywhere it goes there. Then you want to protect the privileged accounts that have access to all of the goodies, right? All the different types of assets that different attackers may be interested in. And please don't store your stuff in password.xls. You want to have privileged identity management, privileged account management, workload identities, and the like. There's a lot of great technology available now that can help you avoid those kinds of incidents and issues. And of course, no security talk is ever complete without talking about patching and how important it is to have security hygiene. You want to have the latest code that's actually got the fixes built in it. You want secure configuration and good operational practices to make sure that those admins are handling those credentials very well, which we'll talk about a little more in a bit. And security operations also needs to be modernized. You can't just have everything looking at the network and thinking you're covered because stuff isn't always on the network. And sometimes it's really hard to get stuff out of network data that you could get 10 times better resolution and actionability out of an endpoint, an identity, or a cloud application detection that's focused on those particular asset types. So that's where the XDR technology comes into. So at the end of the day, security is a pretty complex and challenging space because I just gave you a whole list of things. And when you look at what the attackers can do, they can attack stuff that's been around for 30 plus years, operational technology and industrial control systems that are, controlling physical machinery and processes. And they can go after the DevOps stuff that just shipped and went live 30 seconds ago. So they have a whole lot of choices, and you've got all these systems. You also have data that's accumulating along with it, which, I heard this term once and I could never let it go after that, of a data swamp, where it just keeps accumulating more and more different data. Some of it's managed, some of it's unmanaged, some of it's dark data, but there's all these different things there. And the attackers, they have a lot of options, right? They can go straight for the data. They can go straight for the applications. They can go through a user and to try to get the user to give them access to the data, to the applications. They can go through the infrastructure to get to the data, to get to the applications. They have a lot of choices. And so security is very, very difficult in that respect, as you have to defend against all those paths in some form or fashion. And of course, the regulators are sometimes helping you, and sometimes they're giving you a bunch of extra busy work to explain why this old thing from 10, 15, 20 years ago doesn't apply today to cloud and modern things. So your mileage may vary on that, but you're also dealing with the threats, and sometimes you buy so many tools that it actually becomes work to make all those tools work together. So lots and lots of challenges in the security space. And another way of looking at those challenges, and I found this is a really elegant way to think through what is the task ahead of security and what zero trust is. Because zero trust is based on assumption of trust, right? We assume that things are trustworthy, and we found that they're not. Attackers and security researchers have steadily discovered all these different ways that they can take advantage of these false assumptions of trust. And so that requires us to change those assumptions and no longer trust that, hey, a strong password's all you need. We actually need multi-factor authentication, some other things. We can prevent the attacks. We just stop them at the firewall. Well, you can't prevent them all. Some will get through. So you have to assume compromise and assume a breach and plan accordingly. And there's all these harmful things. And so zero trust is really the process of recognizing these assumptions of trust and then coming up with how do we mitigate those, and then prioritizing within there. So as we take a look at overall zero trust architecture and how we think about this, number one, look end to end. You have to look at the whole problem. If you're just looking at identity, if you're just looking at networking, if you're just looking at prevention, if you're just looking at security operations, you're just looking at governance, all of those are valid perspectives. But if you're only looking at one or two dimensions of it, you're ignoring the rest of it, then the attackers are going to be going in the shadows where you're not paying attention. So it's really important to look at the whole problem, as big and ugly as it is. Second, you then have to prioritize within it, because you can't do it all at once. You have to look at the things that are easy for you. Things that, hey, all we have to do is check this. We already have the Microsoft license for this product. Great. We already know how to do this. We can just extend this tool. Great. Anything that's easy for you, but also anything that's easy for the attackers. There's proven tools. That we've seen it tried before. We've seen it at other organizations. Like, you want to prioritize those things as well. And so you're doing quick wins on the stuff you have, and then you're looking, okay, we've got those done. What are the next set of quick wins? What are the things that get us as much security improvements as possible for the effort we have to put in, because we only have so much time and money. And then three, just get started. Don't do analysis paralysis. Start somewhere. It doesn't matter if you start in identity, start in security operations. You want to have that big view and understand which direction you're going in, but you've got to get started and just continuously improve. Don't wait for the perfect solution. There is no such thing in this continuously changing world. So you want to take us to the principle, Sharon?
So zero trust is proactive. It's an integrated approach to security that applies three core principles across all your layers and your digital estate. So let's talk about business enablement. And security is ultimately a support function for your organization. So everything that security does should be in the context of what's important for your organization. So your mission, your risks, and the processes and how they represent how your business is done. Assume compromise or, assume breach, previously known as assume breach. You should really assume attackers can and will attack everything. So that's identity, network, devices, applications, and infrastructure, and they will find a way through. And that means you need to be prepared in order to remediate that. Together with least privileged access and using verify explicitly, these principles really guide a decision on how to think about problems and how you're faced on security every day. So as you can see, with the least privileged access, you're setting those privileges, and the attackers often navigate an implicit and explicit control relationship between assets and technical estate. Control relationships are also required to work done efficiently. So look at account and management tools, manage to control your servers and containers. With these relationships, the risk by formulating a pathway for attackers and be able to abuse that attack as well. So while you're thinking about your zero trust principles and your architecture, you also got to think about your end user experience as well. I'll hand that over to Mark.
And Sharon, I love what you were saying there about the principles, and I want to put a little bit more emphasis on the business enablement, because one of the things that it's just like assume breach. Hey, you're always assuming there's an attacker, and you're always looking for the attacker. And so you have this sort of pervasive assumption. It's not always true, of course, but you always are looking for it, and that sort of gets your mind primed to look for that. And the business enablement is very similar in that respect, is that, how many times does security identify and unlock a new revenue stream? It happens, right? Like sometimes, hey, we're trying to figure out how to reach, 1 million customers, but it requires an identity. Well, have you heard about decentralized identity? And it's designed for exactly that scenario. And boom, all of a sudden, a business initiative is now possible that wasn't possible. So that does actually happen sometimes, but it's the mindset of always trying to figure out, how do we enable the business? How do we help them be successful? And so when you're looking at problems, you're looking at them from the perspective of trying to find the best way to do it securely, as opposed to, we can just block this, and that's way too risky. Security says no, right? Because that's not a good, healthy way of doing things. And so it pairs very nicely with the assume breach or assume compromise. The place where the business enablement often gets instantiated a lot, and it's a super important part of security, is the usability or the productivity side of it. And so it's really important to be thinking about and balancing those two things all the time. And as much as possible, if you can do invisible security, things that are being done by the security team in the back end, and it doesn't add a step for the users, it doesn't make things harder, that is the ideal way to do security. And so as much as possible, you want to do as much as you can there, so that people can still do their jobs and do it efficiently, effectively. So that's one of the key ways it instantiates. But as you get into the more important things, the more damaging things, you have to start interrupting it. Like an IT admin, you've got credentials for domain admin, global admin, enterprise admin, that you have all of this power over all of these things in the enterprise. You are a target, and if you get hit and successfully phished, you click on the wrong link or something like that, all sorts of bad things happen to the organization because the attacker has free reign. And so in that case, I sort of jokingly think of this as like the person that is carrying the nuclear launch codes, sometimes called the nuclear football, on behalf of the leader of a country. Like, that person is going to be not doing normal things when they have that responsibility. That's a very sensitive, very high impact thing. And so it's not like they're going to go grab some lunch, leave that suitcase there or that briefcase at the table while they go hit the bathroom and come back and hope it's safe. No, you take extra precautions. You definitely have to have balance, and you have to do design work around people's jobs and what they need. So Sharon, did you want to take us through a demonstration of kind of what this looks like in action?
Thanks, Mark. So we understand the importance of how security products play a crucial role in safeguarding your users, devices, and data. So in this demo, Serena is an information worker who's been provisioned a Windows Cloud PC. She will be installing Office and accessing a highly confidential document that's been shared to her by email. You will see phishing resistance MFA, Intune endpoint privilege management, and Purview for optimizing your security posture. As Serena's logging on, she'll be prompted with phishing resistant MFA, and she uses her FIDO2 security key. As we know, MFA is essential in modern cybersecurity to combat the threat of phishing attacks and reducing the risk of accounts being compromised. As Serena is installing Office, she'll be using elevated permissions. This is a policy created in Intune endpoint privilege management, ultimately supporting your zero trust journey by helping your organization achieve a broad user base running with least privilege access and allowing users to still run tasks allowed by your organization to remain productive. As you will see, Serena is actually entering her details to justify with a business justification that she's installing Office. As Serena is navigating through, she is accessing SharePoint already authenticated on her account. She's now received an email from her coworker where she's been provided access to a highly confidential document. Using conditional access authentication context, the document that the SharePoint has been stored on has actually been classified as highly confidential. As you see, Serena is prompted to re-authenticate with her FIDO2 security key to ensure that the sensitive data that is shared to her and users in your organization are for those who actually need access. So you can see different types. You've seen MFA, how Intune actually plays in with protecting your devices, and Purview for optimizing your security posture. So as you can see, we've been working hard on an integrated platform experience. And with that, we've been named the leader in the Forrester Wave Zero Trust Platforms Q3 2023 report. We understand modernizing security is a complex task in this area, and we embrace an end-to-end zero trust architecture to really help effectively mitigate business risks in an area of hybrid and remote work. Mark?
So in addition to analysts and other similar organizations, Microsoft also works actively across the industry to help build consensus for this zero trust generation of security and to contribute all that we've learned from it and, of course, learn from other organizations and their work. We're very active in a number of different collaborations, and there's some great guidance out there. And we work very closely with the Open Group. As I mentioned earlier, I co-chair the Zero Trust Architecture Forum there. And we also work very closely with NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. And each of these organizations is looking at zero trust in a slightly different way. And we actually view that as a good thing. Obviously, there's some more work to be done in terms of mapping and connecting these things together and relating them. But the way the Open Group is addressing that sort of integration with business and IT and enterprise and security architecture and connecting all those together, common principles, the zero trust commandments and the like, that provides one very valuable perspective on zero trust. And you'll see some of the capabilities that were defined in the next few slides. And then with the NIST work, very much focused on the technology available today and brought in, multiple 30, 50, I can't remember the exact number of vendors into the lab, including Microsoft, and put it all together and implemented it and then documented that. And so very much different perspectives on zero trust, both valuable in their own way. And so we'd love to see all of this different work going on in the industry, and we're going to highlight some of that here now. And so this is the zero trust capabilities I mentioned from the Open Group. And these capabilities, think of these as the security equivalent of business capabilities. So there's people, process, technology that make up each one of these, and they're a durable outcome that the rest of the organization can count on. So think about this like, oh, that's our capability to bill a customer. That's our capability to sell a product, to ship a product to the retail store. Our capability to issue a loan to an organization for financial services. Those kind of business capabilities need to be able to interact with security capabilities on an ongoing, durable basis, along with the technical capabilities as well, to launch a new website and the like. And so that's a big part of what the Open Group work has been doing, is to define these capabilities. And this is from the reference model standard from the Open Group is where this diagram is from. And this is getting into sort of the technical diagrams or the architectural diagrams of what zero trust is. And we're going to show you three different ones of these. The first is from the Open Group, then the NIST ones, and then the Microsoft ones. And you'll start to see some of the similarities among these. So there is this great sort of consensus going on. Most of these diagrams have something like about 50-60% of it is is drawing up access control and representing that sort of users and the device they're using, accessing some variety of assets. And so that's that sort of, left 2/3 there. And then there's, hey, the attackers don't always walk up to the building using the paths there that you've paved to try and sneak in. Sometimes they come in, through the fences, through the woods, and try to sneak around or, swim across the river or whatever the case may be. And so you have to protect the assets themselves when they're not being used through these sort of established authorized channels. So that's pretty much represented in just about all of these diagrams. And there's almost always sort of a top and bottom stripe along the top there, the governance and that visibility end to end, and security operations in the case of the Open Group one. And so, really sort of these end-to-end themes that drive across both of those tasks. So that tends to be how these zero trust diagrams are drawn in most cases. And this is the Microsoft capabilities overlaid for reference. We're not going to go through all of these, but you can see where the Microsoft technology relates to this particular diagram. Now, switching over to the zero trust architecture from NIST, you can see that same pattern there of sort of that endpoint there with the user identities, the ICAM, the identity and credential access management, if I recall correctly on that one, and then the assets on the right with the cloud and the on-prem assets. And in this case, the security operations or security analytics is across the top, not the bottom, no big deal. And then data security is seen as an end-to-end theme across all of these things in this diagram. And so, again, very similar. This is the Microsoft technology that overlays across it. So you've got your identity technology, you've got your device security technology, you've got the various different data center and cloud protection technologies there, and then you have the data across the bottom, and then the security operations elements in the security analytics across the top. So very, very similar in concept to the Open Group one. And one of the things that we really want to highlight is that blue line there in the middle around the feedback mechanisms and the continuous improvement. The threats don't stop changing. The platforms don't stop changing. The business requirements don't stop changing in today's world. And so the security must have a real-time feed and feedback mechanism to continuously adjust to this world, to reprioritize, to change things, et cetera, to keep up with all of those changes. Very much a continuous improvement discipline. Now, moving on to the zero trust architecture from Microsoft, not too different than the others, very much policy driven in the center, and then each of the different technical pillars of identity, endpoint, data, apps, infrastructure, and network kind of laid out there. And then the threat protection, another name for security operations or security analytics, very much a interconnected piece across the bottom there. And then, moving on to the next one, you'll see all the Microsoft technologies then mapped to it. Of course, it's a Microsoft diagram, so we're always going to be mapping to that. And you can see here that, there's a common theme that Microsoft has invested really across all of these. Sometimes it's represented a little bit differently, but, the zero trust is really driving towards a consensus. And we're really happy to see that in the industry because it helps folks, get past the what is it, how does it work, and on to actually executing and getting a better security posture, a better security response. So lots of goodness going on there in the industry partnership space. Sharon, did you want to talk a little bit about security as a team sport? I know it's one of your favorite topics.
Thanks, Mark. So as I said, security is a team sport. As we know, zero trust is a comprehensive security framework, and it just involves multiple layers and components ranging from IAM, networking, device management, and monitoring. So collaboration among teams with expertise in these areas is critical to design and implement a coherent zero trust strategy. So when you're safeguarding your zero trust architecture, look at a collaborative team strategy. As you know, there's a number of business assets that you need to protect across your organization, responsibilities, ensuring those are distributed among different teams, and ensuring that your business stakeholders are also part of those technical assets as well. So you'll always have that one person, or you're going to have multiple people leading those particular areas. But you would see, for example, if you're an identity access admin, you would still need visibility in devices as potentially you could be using, such as conditional access policies, and integrating those together as part of a security strategy. So what we'd love to talk to you about next are really the type of roles that would be involved in your team security sport. Mark?
Thanks, Sharon. And so there's a bunch of jobs or roles that, and roles are just a set of tasks that people do. So sometimes these are, dedicated security team jobs, and sometimes these are a part-time thing in a smaller organization. But there's a bunch of things that are just absolutely 100% security. All the things around security operations, responding to incidents, those are security jobs, security team jobs oftentimes. Posture management, making sure that the organization stays secure, governance, compliance management for security as well. But there's all these other roles as well. So if you look at all these other different teams, your risk and your compliance teams that focus on that for the whole organization, all your different technical teams, they're the ones that are applying the patches. Anyone here going to let a security team patch and reboot your servers? Probably not. The technology leadership, CIOs and CISOs and technology directors all have a part to play in that. Even up in the executive and the boardroom folks, they ultimately are accepting the risk on behalf of the entire organization. And so security risk does have to be part of that, because if an incident happens, it affects the entire organization's revenue and budget, not just the security teams, right? And so they have a part to play in it, as do development and architects and the like. So lots and lots of folks actually have a role in security. So now let's talk a little bit about how some of these roles are going to be interested in some of the technology that's been coming out in the past couple of years. So let's take a role-centric view of that.
So now we're going to talk about recent key updates that are going to help your zero trust strategy. So what we've done, we've aligned these recent updates along with the roles that Mark had referred to earlier. So what we're going to do, we're going to tackle them by the pillars. So let's look at identity. So for identity, which we showed in the demo, phishing resistance, multi-factor authentication, that really helps reduce the risk of accounts being compromised. So typically you would look at high privilege admin accounts. They tend to be frequent targets of attackers. So putting phishing resistance MFA on these accounts will ensure that you are actually protecting them. Then let's look at app health recommendations. And that's really sort of a find and fix applications that are increasing your security risk. So there could be that one inactive app that has a service principal that's assigned to it and the password hasn't been changed, could be for a number of years. So that really helps in securing your environment and using recommended and best practices to reduce the risk of compromise. As we've been working diligently, we also have external identity cross-tenant access. And that's really simplifying your step-to-step cross-tenant partnerships. So your B2B collaboration. You can apply policies, and which will apply again with your connection to your partners. So you'll be able to securely collaborate with external partners while maintaining the control and security against your organization. And Microsoft Entra Internet Access and Private Access. So it's really secure access to your public internet and private network access, also referred to as SSE. Mark, please talk to us about devices.
So as we look at the device technology, in the past year or so, there's been some key developments we want to make sure that you have noticed because, there's a lot of stuff moving fast lately. Endpoint privilege management, saw that in the demo. Essentially, installing Office, you're able to do that just-in-time elevation of privileges for those kinds of tasks. Great technology. Another one that's super important in the case of privileged attacks, which are very, very unfortunately very common, very damaging. The LAP solution. This is basically the cloud new version of it that allows you to manage through cloud solutions, the local admin password solution, random local admin password, so that if someone compromises one machine, they can't take over others. Group policy analytics helps you get an understanding of all your GPOs, because GPOs are simple, right? Not so much, but help get a handle on those so you can migrate them to the modern approach using Intune and other MDM types of technologies. And then this one isn't exactly a technology release, but it's a very important change. Folks that have Microsoft 365 E5 license now have access to Defender for IoT capabilities. Very, very cool. You can look at your IoT devices in addition to your traditional IT devices. And of course, Defender for IoT will look at IoT and OT devices for reference there. And then one thing I want to call attention to really quickly, we use the term there at the top of the identity one of access architect. And that's because in today's day and age, in the fusion of access control between identity and network technology, and often and many others as well, it's really difficult to say, oh, I only know network architecture, I only know identity architecture. To be truly an architect, you have to really know both of those. Engineering and specialty and getting into the real details and configurations, there's going to be some distinct skill sets there that will specialize out. But from an access standpoint, it's hard to call yourself an architect if you only know one half or the other in today's world.
So let's talk about data. One of the areas that we've been working on is really around adaptive protection. So what does that mean? That really adjust your DLP policies based on your user's individual risk. We also have now available bring your own detections. That's right. You can now bring in your third-party tools. We have a connector that allows the awareness of insider risk context. So it could be your third parties, that's your non-Microsoft tools. You can now plug that in. And then we also have endpoint DLP just in time. Really, it holds back the access to the user file until the policy has fully evaluated that an individual actually has access to it as well.
And on the multi-cloud side, big one here is the full GCP support for Defender for Cloud Security Posture Management, or CSPM, as some people like to say. Getting that full set of attack path analysis and Cloud Security Explorer and all those great posture management tools in for GCP. And this is an important step because it really brings together the three main clouds. There are other clouds out there, but the Azure, AWS, GCP, that full posture management capability across it. And of course, the XDR, or sometimes called Cloud Workload Protection Platform, or sometimes a Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, because we got lots of acronyms here. But really kind of completing that story and having that three main cloud support in addition to the on-premises agents and other kind of capabilities there. So it's like a full hybrid of everything kind of infrastructure. So really, really important, the visibility there that helps feed the security operations, security posture management, and then the teams that are actually fixing it, that are running the DevOps workloads, or the IT engineering and operations folks. So really, really important capability there.
So let's talk about our SOC teams. We've been working very diligently on Defender experts for XDR. So it's really to help our SOC teams help with incident response and hunting. Also excited to talk about Defender for Identity, the AD certificate services coverage. Now you have the visibility for your critical identity on-prem as well, so you can bring that in there. And then we've also been working very hard on some of our Intel profiles as well. So it's Defender Threat Intelligence. We've added 26 new threat actor profiles. So it's really providing a more of a proactive step in helping you secure in terms of your operations.
And finally, we have our application and DevOps security space. So lots of roles with an interest in this space: security operations, posture management, of course, looking at those Defender for Cloud consoles or wherever they happen to be, pulling that data to other tools, as well as your application software solution architects, the various different folks there, and the software security engineers that are helping secure it. So Defender for Cloud now has visibility of APIs through Defender for APIs, as well as Defender for DevOps. So pulling all that in there, and they get some insight into the application coding process itself through GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. GitHub Advanced Security for GitHub as well. The Azure DevOps is the new one. But if you're more of a developer or a software security engineer, you're generally probably going to be looking a little bit more at the GitHub Advanced Security element in that interface there, because it's a little bit more oriented towards putting the bugs in the right places and helping provide those clear, actionable security fixes and recommendations and alerts and the like there. So lots of area there to help with that full-on application lifecycle and platform approach. And so all of those capabilities are a subset of the larger Microsoft platform. This is the Microsoft Cybersecurity Reference Architecture. For those of you that hadn't seen it, this is one of the more complex diagrams I've ever seen in PowerPoint. So this is a summary of the Microsoft capabilities across the board. It is an interactive diagram. You can download it there at that AKMS/MCRA, and there will be an updated version shortly after the Ignite show with all of the latest and greatest everything on it. But that's how it all kind of comes together there. Of course, this is a lot, right? And you need to be able to do this kind of in a priority order of what to do first, next, and later. And so we have really two different areas that we've invested in this. The first is a self-service, public documentation, public videos, guidance, instruction videos, etc. And so that's that self-service element. And then there's also the Microsoft Assistance part of it, where some folks are like, hey, we need like a workshop, or we need to have an expert come and guide us and recommend what to do first. We've got that as well through Microsoft Unified Engagements. We keep these obviously consistent, but they are the two different channels that we use to help you out with that. So let's take a quick look at the self-service pieces of it. We have a new name. It doesn't really change a whole lot of the content so far. It's called the Security Adoption Framework, or SAF. So think of this similar to the Cloud Adoption Framework, if you're familiar with that term, or the CAF, sometimes it's called. What this is just a wrapper around a bunch of the existing stuff that's already been out for a little bit. And it's also going to sort of guide us as we move forward to help provide the guidance for you. So the CISO workshop is one of the key things there that help with that strategy and program aspects of security. And then there's some recent guidance around those business outcomes that security should be promising, which we'll be talking about a little more in a bit, that go through the governance and people and process elements of how do I secure remote and hybrid work? How do I rapidly modernize my security posture? How do I identify, protect sensitive business data and the like? So lots of things there to help you adopt zero trust in that way. Then the next layer down, end-to-end technical architecture, this Microsoft Cybersecurity Reference Architectures. That diagram you just saw is one of a larger set of diagrams that are there and downloadable as a deck. And so that's really where that is. That's an integral part of the Security Adoption Framework. And then a lot more technical initiatives and capabilities, specific things, which I'll go to the next slide on. This is a little bit of an eye chart. So this is meant for you to sort of pause the video, take a look at. We're definitely not going to read through this, but we've got our ninja training, we've got top 10 lists, privilege access guidance, a whole bunch of different things in each of those different areas within that security adoption framework. And so lots of resources there for you to take advantage of. Now, the adoption framework itself, as we sort of get into the way that we think through this, as I mentioned earlier, there's those business outcomes. Whether or not your business is already asking for it as a security team, you should be trying to make and meet some promises, helping people do their job securely from anywhere, minimizing business damage from security incidents. These are the things that security should be aiming to provide. And then there's sort of a how to do this, which is the technical platform elements of having good security hygiene, specifically around patching, but there's a lot more to it, security updates and the like. Securing identity and access, security operations, infrastructure development. Each of these are effectively a technical modernization initiative that we guide you through in the security adoption framework. And so think of this in the terms of like, hey, I want to have a good secure building, right, or facility or campus. And so I want people to be able to be secure wherever they are. I want them to be able to get to anything that they need to for their business, et cetera. But in order to do that, I need lights, cameras, I need fences, I need to have a center that's, answering phone calls, et cetera. So there's a little bit of a what versus how here. And so we wanted to bring that all together under one strategic framework so you can execute on those and drive the right outcomes. And each stakeholder is going to have a slightly different view and interest in these. So that security strategy and program is more of a CISO, CIO, technical director, and the like, as well as some interest on the business side and communicating, integrating with the business, and architecture to sort of bring it all together. If you do have architects, if not, have someone that's acting as an architect. And then you have your cyber reference architecture and then all these different initiatives to modernize each element. And there are workshops for each of these elements to plan these, to drive these in the Microsoft Unified Catalog. So, talk to your account manager or your CSAM or CSAM, as we like to say, and they'll be able to guide you to that security adoption framework.
Thanks, Mark. As you can see, we have a number of guidances available, so I'd really recommend digging into those when you have the time available. So as you plan your organization's zero trust strategy, it's really essential to consider what should you be looking at in the future and key areas of deployment. And here's what's coming up on the horizon. So let's talk about Security Service Edge. That's our innovation approach to help you get rid of your VPN.
And then PKI as a service very simply gets a lot of those PKI use cases done using cloud infrastructure that you don't have to run and set up all of the complexity and keep it secure. And, very, very difficult and challenging. So much better to use cloud-based solutions for that.
Token protection, as that is a rising attack vector, you have the option to implementing and robust token protection measures as part of that.
Yeah, I love that because we're definitely seeing a rise in those attacks. And then Security Copilot. So this is basically taking AI, which is pretty much to date has been machine learning used by data scientists in the back end, and makes that available to individual users. So you can learn from the data sets. You can quickly go over the data sets, have a natural chat conversation with it, essentially the chat GPT of security, as it were. So lots and lots of possibilities there on the horizon.
And then we have security posture management. As the industry is moving, a holistic security posture management is essential. As you can see, we've had multi-cloud. You can bring that in and it'll make it easier for you to monitor.
And then the Defender teams are putting a lot of focus and investment into real-time and custom detections to help the analysts respond quickly, or in many cases, actually automatically respond. So analysts, the humans don't have to do anything, and you don't have to wait for that slowdown. Some of the ransomware stuff was announced recently that on a very high confidence alert, will just simply automatically respond and stop those actors in their tracks. And of course, report it to the analyst so they can, do the investigation and confirmation. But you don't want to wait for your entire enterprise to be encrypted before you actually take action. And so a lot of innovation going on in that space as well as in the custom space as well.
So we really want to thank you, and we hope this session has been helpful in guiding you and limiting your organizational risk on your zero trust journey. Thank you.
Thank you.